Actually, I would really, really like to start chatting about alien weaponry here and now. And before we start, I want to say that I want to make a confession. I discovered the band only last year. I was at metal exhibition in Paris. It was called
Ah,
Diabolos and Musica. And there was a whole section dedicated to metal around the globe. So not only US and European Union. And that is where I saw the music videos of Alien Weaponry. And oh my God, how badass it was. So can you please tell me, how does it feel to be literally the ambassadors of Maori culture in metal industry?
yeah, it's cool that you saw us there too, because we were in Paris last year and we tried to go see that because obviously we knew we were in this exhibition. But the one day that we were there was like the one day of the week that the museum was closed. So we were
Oh,
like, because we were like super stoked about being on that exhibition. But yeah, we try not to think about ourselves too much as ambassadors because that comes sometimes with a lot of pressure and a lot of weight.
mhm.
But we are aware, of course, of sometimes the reach and the importance of what we can do with our music for our culture and for the awareness and education that we, strive to give people, not just all over the world, but when we share it all over the world, we can bring it home to our own people. It kind of, for example, we were told growing up here, like nobody cares about your language, nobody cares about your people outside of your own people, like,
Mhm.
so we were told that, it's only a million of you, nearly a million Maori that live in New Zealand, that you're the only ones that care about it in the huge world. Nobody cares. So every time we go on tour, and we have people all over the world singing our songs back at us in Maori or English, but like in Maori, it proves them wrong. It proves those people who told us that nobody would care wrong. And so when we do that, it shows the people back home who have only been exposed to nobody cares, who get down. That when you get told that over and over and over again, it can get quite depressing and you can find it difficult to want to be a part of something that you're told nobody cares about. So when we play the shows, we get a lot of messages from Maori back here who are like, oh man, you've made me sort of realize, how important it is to maintain our language and our culture and our traditions. And you've made me want to start learning again or reconnecting or things like that. So for us, that's really like a driving force with what we do, sharing our songs with the world to kind of bring the love for it home. So it's cool.
Yes, and you are doing a very important job. And with this thing that you've just said, do you think that maybe there is some sort of a request in, well, we are discussing metal scene here. There is a request from the audience to authenticity because I think nowadays more and more bands are getting quite a big recognition and approval and I don't know, admiration. I mean, the Who is singing in Mongolian, Bloody Wood singing in the language too. I mean, so is it like a request? People are tired of English language.
Yeah, I think it's just now that music in a different language has become more accessible, because once upon a time, before the internet, I would even say, like, to really be able to enjoy music like that, if you wanted to at least go beyond the listening, you would either need to speak the language or maybe you would have to have a physical translation, like this is before you could just Google it. But now, of course, when someone goes metal, whatever, and alien weaponry shows up, or Bloodywood or the Who show up,
Mhm.
you go, oh man, they're singing in a different language. And then you can click the description box and have the whole translation, or you can Google, kaitanga to translate it, and boom, the internet gives you the full translation, So it's like, I think it's now people are able to more easily absorb music that is presented to you in different language. And I think what you said too, it's broader now. You can broaden your horizons because of that accessibility. Because yeah, a lot of people sing in English. We still sing in English, and it's nice to be able to have something different every now and then.
Mhm.
People I think now are becoming much more open minded to these things, and it also keeps the music sort of interesting, because yeah, there's so many great musicians out there. A lot of the time, it's like, how can we even get this ourselves. We still have a lot of people that tell us to not bother singing in English, which is quite funny because for a while, like here in New Zealand, there were some people that had told the band, like, you should not sing in Maori. No one will care. No one will like it if you sing in Maori. But now that we do what we do, a lot of people tell us to not even bother singing in English, that they just want us to sing in Maori. So there's this kind of interesting thing happening now where, yeah, that's kind of getting flipped on its head a little bit. And I think it's purely too, it's out of saturation of the market right now. Like people are hearing English all the time, and people think it's cool when they hear something different.
Yeah, actually, this is ironical. This is your absolute trademark, and this is how you, well, stand out. It's as simple as it is.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned internet and possibility to translate songs from different languages. And in your recent song, 1000 Friends, as far as I understood, you mentioned the dark side of the internet in modern world. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. That song was actually written by our singer. So he writes all the English stuff, and then I wrote, and sometimes me and our drummer wrote the Maori stuff. He's never been a huge fan of what social media does to people.
Mm-hmm.
The way that people use social media, sort of talking about that 1,000 friends, but you're all alone, people that validate themselves by whatever this number is on a screen, or by what the people on the other side of the screen are saying about you, or things like that. And so he's never agreed with that sort of mentality, and that's sort of the ethos of the song. And it's quite funny because it's this double-edged sword too, where as a band, we have to use social media a lot. It
Yes.
becomes part of there's that running joke that, like, if you want to be a musician, you also have to be a content creator. It becomes sort of hand in hand these days as the method of gaining the biggest reach. So he has to simultaneously dislike this thing that he has to use for his job. So it's all about finding a balance, and understanding its usefulness as a tool, and to not abuse it, whether you're abusing it as a creator or a consumer. It can be abused on both sides. So that's kind of the ethos of 1,000 friends.
Yes, I, by the way, totally get the situation. I'm an artist. I create oil paintings, and I absolutely annoyed by the fact that, I mean, besides just painting, I just have to, I don't know, dance with my pictures.
Right, right, right.
It's just super annoying. So yeah, I totally get it. It hurts. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's speak a little bit about your new album, and which song was the biggest fun to create, and which song was the biggest challenge?
Ooh, most fun, I think, is the track called Ponatsuri, which is the second to last track on the album. And that one was a lot of fun because the way the riff came about, which people are loving that riff too, as we now people are more listening to it, they're kind of going, oh man, this Ponatsuri song's great. What is so fun about that one is that it came about because Lewis played it incorrectly in the studio. Like he slipped, and Josh Wilbur, our producer, went, wait a second. What was that? That was cool. Like, let's do that. And so luckily, he was recording it. And so we played the recording over and over. And then to kind of say, okay, so obviously you slipped and something went wrong. But if you were to write that so it sounded proper, what would it be? And that's what the riff ended up being. So we had a lot of fun with that one. Also, because that song has a lot of sound effects in it, to kind of further the story. Because one thing we were trying to do on this album is enhance the cinematic quality of the songs, so that there's kind of, because we sing in a different language, we liked the idea of adding anything we could to supplement the lack of understanding the lyrics. So if you weren't looking at a translation of the lyrics, could you still kind of understand what was going on, because we've added these other sound effects? So, and that song Ponaturi has probably the most sound effects. It's got underwater sounds and whale sounds, and then these like made up sounds that are supposed to sound like a sort of a sea creature demon thing.
Uh-huh.
So we had a lot of fun with that song. We had a lot of fun. In terms of challenging, I think if I remember correctly, Taniwha, which was the song with Randy Blythe on it, was quite a challenge to get down. There's like a lot of different elements happening in that song. And then of course we also had to make space for Randy's section, and we didn't really know how that would go because Randy wasn't there with us in the studio. He recorded his piece after the fact. So that one kind of had a lot of bits going on, if I remember correctly. It's the right one. And I think that was one too where like Henry had to really like I think that was the song he had the hardest time with the drums on. He was like, "Man, this is drums written by a guitar player for sure."
Okay, yeah, it's always such a fun to record albums as far as I get one
It
way
is, it
or
is. For
another.
me, it was my first time as well. Like it was my first album I recorded with the band in full. I did half of the last one too, so I was kind of having a blast, like being a part of it from the beginning and seeing what the whole sort of thing was like.
Mhm. And did it match your expectations? And actually, did you even have any while you were joining?
I actually don't know what I had in expectation wise. I loved it, whatever it was. You know, I had a great time with it. You know, it was awesome to be able to work with someone like Josh Wilbur as well. That was real eye opening for me in terms of sort of understanding the production world of recording an album. You know, not just the playing. Like, yeah, I can do the playing, but it was really cool watching the actual like what's happening on the screens. You know, and how he forms the album on his end of things as the on the technical side. So it was cool.
Okay, so you mentioned the sounds that were added to the album, and I was thinking, have you ever thought about actually adding some national instruments? I know that, I mean, if we speak about Maori instruments, I know that they have a lot of, you have a lot of them, sorry, a lot of pipes. Yes, so I don't know the names, and I'm afraid I will not be able to pronounce it, but have you ever thought about adding national instruments, or you think it will turn you into a folk metal band?
No, we already do. We already do. So we have a lot of the woodwind. Taonga puoro is the broad term for the traditional Maori instruments. Now we use a lot of the woodwind instruments in different forms. The sort of trumpet-esque ones, which is like a conch shell. We use the conch shell a lot.
Uh-huh.
We use the much more delicate, like small flutes throughout a lot of the songs because they create a great ambience, you know, and sort of
Uh-huh.
like it
Uh-huh.
adds to that same cinematic, atmospheric quality. And they suit it a lot. This album might have a little less in it, but that was just because of the nature of the songs, I think. We also use something called in English, it's called a bull roarer, which is a piece of wood attached to a string. And when you spin it like really fast over your head, it creates this kind of sound. And we use that sound a lot because that's kind of like a heavy sound,
Mhm.
especially when you put it over like drums and guitar. It sounds quite. Everyone's like, "What is that big sound in the back?" So yeah, it's just like a little piece of wood on a string. And actually, Josh recorded that on this album. He bought one and did it in his studio at home. Yeah, we use those all the time, and we'll continue to do so because they just have this great feel about them. They create such a cool vibe that when you're listening to these heavy riffs and all of a sudden you hear these soft whistling in the background, you're like, whoa, what is that? And because they don't sound like a flute, you know, which is cool. They do have this kind of because they're simple. They're definitely not like as complex as a modern flute is. They're kind of like a couple of holes that you can alter just a few notes and create wavy sounds and things. So yeah, we love using all those.
Okay, and well, as long as I mentioned folk metal, what do you think about generally sticking to some genre? Because, you know, for me, metal music is incredible because it provides just a huge amount of freedom. So technically, you can do absolutely whatever you want. So is it important for you to stick to, well, groove, thrash sort of thing, or you are open for experiments?
Well, one of the fun things, because that's always been one of the debates about alien weaponry is what are we? A lot of people are like, oh, yeah, they're thrash, or no, they're groove, or no, they're metalcore, or they're, folk metal, and all these things. And we're always like, well, we don't really consider ourselves any of them. We are just a metal band that like to sing metal, but like particularly with this third album, one of the things that we really played with, because it's, taken time for us to kind of figure this out, is that because the thing that makes, when you listen to certain bands, let's say Slayer, who are thrash,
Mhm.
that's what people loved Slayer for, is the thrash. So if Slayer all of a sudden don't do thrash, people are going to go, what the heck? You know what I mean? For us, we've found that what binds us as alien weaponry is Maori,
Mhm.
which is a language. It's not a genre, it's a language. So what we discovered was it means where it can be pretty flexible with the music happening behind the language. So, we've got some songs like Momoko, which are pretty standard groove, but then you've got more thrashy ones and you've got more proggy ones, or the kind of Gojira-esque soundy stuff. And then we've even got some people have been calling Tanifa like a death metal song. I'm not sure I agree, but they've been saying it. So people are picking out like lots of different genres in our music, but they can still at the end of the album go, but somehow it sounds like alien weaponry. They're on a track by track, they're kind of jumping around on the inspirations, but why is it that it still sounds like alien weaponry? And that's, I think, or we think, because it's of the language element. The cultural element is the glue that binds all of it and identifies it as us. So, which is cool because, yeah, it gives us a lot of flexibility with playing around with our subgenres or genres of metal that we use. Even inspiration outside of metal. We have some songs that are inspired by drum and bass music, electric music and things like that. So it's quite cool to be able to play around with your sound because it's the language or cultural element that makes us identifiable as a band, not so much the music, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes, this is an amazing answer. Thank you so much. Well, the very last question I have, and this quite global. So, what is the message that alien weaponry delivers to the world?
To the world, we just like to bring, we like the idea of people just being exposed to things outside their own bubble, whatever that is. If you live in a very small town in the middle of Germany, that you can be exposed to a culture that you would not be exposed to otherwise, unless you flew all the way to New Zealand to experience Maori culture. Now, of course, the internet makes it a lot easier for people to be exposed to things outside of their own bubble, which is great because I think, cultural awareness of any kind leads to a sort of more well informed public, and then that makes a more accepting public. When people are afraid of what they don't know. So, I experience that a lot, of course, because of the way I look. If people look at me and they go, holy heck, he must be in a gang or something, because they don't know otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
When we do our music or we share stuff about Maori culture online, and we get one more person who goes, oh, cool. So it's like a traditional thing. Then they tell someone, oh, and well, they might have someone who goes, oh my god, look at those gang tattoos, and they go, actually, it's a cultural thing, blah 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 blah. And so, when people know, they're less afraid or less unsure, or sometimes it doesn't change. Some people still know and they go, nah, but that's fine, right? There are people out there who are willing to change their mindsets because they now know better, and that's kind of our goal. Is every other person who's exposed to something new, I think, leads for a better, more accepting world, one person at a time. So that's kind of our goal.
I really think that you're fulfilling it like 100%. This is,
Thank you. We're
yes.
trying. We're trying.